Just a reminder, the current video and my channel as well is targeted at mature audiences. Welcome everyone to somehow the first ever video that will go into details about the Hello Neighbor books. This video was born because of two main reasons. One is that it was requested and it won a poll on my channel, and two, it's because after rereading the books, I have come to the conclusion that many people who attacked me for having a certain opinion on certain characters are suffering from confirmation bias. So as always in my lore videos, I will try to show things as objectively as possible, and then I will subjectively discuss things in the end of the video. I will tell you what's in the books, and I will show you multiple book pages, so if you want to, you can stop the video and read it yourself. In short, the books could be summed up with the following quote.
It's a tragic misunderstanding that could have been really easily avoided if you just finished his sentence in time.
Yes, the plot of Hide and Seek and Hello Neighbor could be told in 200 pages or less, but somehow this became 600 pages long with a lot of fillers and unnecessary details that kind of took the plot in a whole new direction. And it all happens mainly due to horrible communication and lack of communication between characters and story elements that are dragged on for way too long. I want to say here and now that I don't blame Carly Ann West, who is the writer of these books, for doing any of this. She was given a task, write over 1200 pages. Here is the main plot elements, go and write it. And she wrote it. Now let's see the story that the books have to offer. Book 1 to 3 are called the Nikki trilogy by the fandom because they are told from Nikki's quite subjective perspective. The second trilogy, which I put into another video, are called the Aaron trilogy. This is books 4 to 6 because it's from Aaron's also quite subjective perspective. Chronologically, books 4 to 6 happen first, and books 1 to 3 happen later, like a few years later. Book 1 starts with 12 years old Nicky Roth talking about his dead grandmother, who was a huge impact on his life so far. She was the only person to really understand him, according to Nicky. Nicky believes in aliens religiously. Nicky mentions that they are moving houses way too often. They are like non-stop moving. This time they are moving because his dad, Jay Roth, who is a journalist, got a job in a town called Ravenbrooks at a newspaper called the Ravenbrooks Banner. Nicky's tone is quite depressed about the moving and in general as well. And when I was a newcomer, I kind of thought that I'm going to read this book and I will get to know more about the games, but I had to realize that despite Hello Neighbor is supposed to be for mature audiences, this isn't the case with the books. And the fact that the books are quite different from the games. I didn't know much about the multiple writers at the time who basically wrote their own interpretation about the same plot, each being different, like Nikita, Carly, and whoever wrote the later media. By the time I got to the pages of detailed food jokes, I kind of realized what I'm dealing with. So basically these food jokes disturb everything. They are mostly unbearable. They disturb the flow of the main plot. They disturb incredibly important details in the story and prevent it from progressing. And whenever we reach a food joke, I will just scream food to disturb you as well. So not much after these horrible food jokes, while moving in, Nicky feels like he is being watched while he is standing on the street. I will tell you straight up, and sometimes I will spoil some details that are revealed in the book much later. It's such a big event that somebody moved to the friendly court named Street, which is the name of the street where the Petersons and the Roths live, that Aaron from the opposite side house just straight up stalks Nicky and his family while they are moving in. Nicky has returning nightmares from his even smaller childhood. These nightmares exist to show the reader plot-wise what happened in the past, and also they are here to foreshadow some things. By the end of book 6, these nightmares got a little boring, but you will see why. This current nightmare tries to stuff the Fear Supermarket minigame into the plot. You know, the minigame that was originally supposed to be in the family storyline, which is a different storyline, and makes the most sense there. This isn't the first thing from the Hello Neighbor games, and mainly from other storylines, that is kind of put into these books plot for some reason. We will come across the Alpha 3 ending and other fear minigames as well. Here, this grocery store nightmare shows that Nikki, as a little child, was accidentally left once in the grocery store by his grandmother and only was found after the store closed.
Later.
Aaron puts a notebook paper on his room's window, and that's how he starts communicating with Nikki. He keeps writing texts on it, so Nikki probably has the eye of an eagle because he can read everything that Aaron is writing without binoculars as well. Not much after this, the two kids, Nikki and Aaron, start befriending each other, suspecting that one kid is just as weird as the other one. Nikki visits the Petersons not much later and comes to the conclusion that old houses are weird. Then Nikki meets Aaron's dad, Theodore Peterson, for the first time, and already during their first meeting, where the man just exists in his own house, Nikki already describes him as a giant man who looks like a cartoon villain. Theodore is an engineer and an amusement park designer, the one who built the later mentioned the Golden Apple amusement park, just as many other amusement parks around the world. By the way, Theodore says like 5 sentences in 6 books. He talks insanely little amount, despite he is the title character. Aaron's mother, Diane Peterson, is smoking like a factory chimney. Yes, this Diane will be nothing like the game's Diane, and she lets her daughter cut the onions with a giant knife because, according to Diane, she is a very much crier when it comes to cutting onions. Mia is 10 years old and Aaron is 12 years old, the same age as Nikki. A bit later, Mia develops a very tiny crush on Nikki, which is a funny thing, but rather this than what we are suffering through later as a side plot. Diane is a teacher in the local school. It is mentioned that she was originally a dancer / ballerina who even used to perform in one of the amusement park openings. Food! I will mention here, and it will make sense in the next trilogy. Nikki is never once called Narf by Aaron. Aaron is never present when Nikki is called Narf. Theodore has quite of a unique humor because he starts talking about bones in the human body, which immediately freaks Nikki out. Like, already at this point, if Theodore talked about how he watched the paint dry on the wall, even that would freak Nikki out. So Theodore says that the human body is capable of living without certain bones, but what it cannot live without is the funny bone. And this is a joke, and he starts tickling Mia, who is starting to laugh. Theodore in these books is portrayed to be insane, crazy, mentally. Why? Yes. In the game's universe, it is crystal clear and it is confirmed officially that the neighbor is sane and he is aware of his actions, but in the books, especially in this trilogy, he is not. Later, Aaron and Nikki decide to do some urbex and break into the now abandoned Golden Apple amusement park, which is a giant park just standing there. It was closed and abandoned after an accident. While Nikki wants to know everything, Aaron doesn't really tell him anything and gatekeeps a lot of informations. He doesn't go into details about how the park even closed down. And even those little informations are progressing so slowly, it takes forever to just get to know a very basic piece of information. Later we get to know that Nikki's mother is working at the Ravenbrooks University because apparently they have a university and she's a chemist. Nikki decides to research the Golden Apple amusement park accident and he goes to the university's library. He finds out through articles that a young girl named Lucy Yi, and I will pronounce her name like this. So Lucy Yi died on one of the rides, namely the roller coaster ride. She was 7 years old when she died. It happened a few years ago. It is also said that people were so furious about the accident, they burned the park down in rage. Later in the Aaron trilogy, it turns out to be unconfirmed because we don't exactly know how the park burned down. And I want to say that some of the newspaper articles that the main character is reading may be incorrect or state misinformation. Later on, Nicky goes to school and he meets a guy named Enzo Esposito. Later, he gets to meet Enzo's father, who is also a reporter at the Ravenbrook Banner. His name is Miguel Esposito, and basically their dads are colleagues. Enzo tells more details about the Lucy accident, but when Nicky mentions that he is hanging out with Aaron, Enzo changes tone suddenly and he's like, "Ew, you hang out with him? Weird." Yeah, this is the tone he's using. He's telling Nicky to watch his back all the time when he's hanging out with Aaron and basically just ruins Aaron's reputation under seconds. I'm honestly not surprised after the past years that people do such thing even in fiction. Nicky is trying to convince Enzo that Aaron isn't a serial killer, but he isn't really succeeding. Nicky and Aaron continue to hang out. They are now working on an invention because both of them really like to invent stuff and like putting machines together. This invention is the quite infamous fart machine. They record the farting sounds and they plan to play it on the speakers in the grocery store. This is the big plan. Yeah, I know that they are kids, but what the hell? And this machine and the way this machine works is just so detailed. I kind of put down the food I was about to eat and I didn't eat that day. While going to the grocery store, the boys tell each other shit and diaper jokes and I really started to feel like that I'm watching Total Drama Island. Later on, Nicky witnesses Theodore going to the basement. Wow. And somehow this is a very shocking event for him already. Like, nothing has happened yet, but the kid is already shocked that a grown adult is going to a basement. By that time, Theodore is fully aware that the kids keep getting themselves into trouble and that Aaron, who is a very problematic kid on his own, now found another kid who is just unhinged as him. Obviously, this awakens worry in both of the parents, not just Theodore. Aaron and Nicky later break into a llama farm, which is painfully detailed once again. They usually go on these urbex and breaking in trips at night, so Kali can write it in a very creepy way because it's dark. Nicky ends up stealing a metal sign from the llama farm because it says "Send Nick's llamas" and this is filler, but it had to be mentioned because it will come up later. Nicky and Aaron also keep breaking into the Golden Apple amusement park multiple times and they are picking locks because that's what kids do, I guess. There's a now abandoned factory near the Golden Apple amusement park called the Golden Apple Factory, and they progress with the lockpicking room by room in this set factory. So like their hobby is to open up the locks and discover what's in the factory. They end up building themselves a little corner in one of these rooms, which is actually a cool thing on its own, but throughout the books I really started questioning the safety of this town and American towns in general. By the way, yes, this story is taking place in America in case it wasn't obvious yet. Where I live, you just don't let your child wander in the forest on their own and you don't let your child go into abandoned amusement parks or factories because of the people, not even the place itself. While hanging out with Aaron, Nicky also keeps reading about the Golden Apple amusement park because he is really interested in the topic. He is reading articles that say that the Golden Apple amusement park was built by Theodore Masters Peterson. Its opening day was a huge success, which later kind of gets retconned in books 4 to 6. There's a mention about the emergency brakes and the lack of safety checks early on already in the story, and it will be very important later. And here the reader's critical thinking must be present because this newspaper article itself is already stating false things. Books 4 to 6 will retcon some of these events entirely because according to those books, the accident with Lucy is happening on opening day. Theodore will specifically mention multiple times in books 4 to 6 that the safety checks must be done and that the park has limits like how big the attractions can be built. But the investors, the people who give them the money to build the park, just see money in front of their eyes and not the importance of human lives. I will highlight this later on. I just wanted to mention this. Meanwhile, Aaron also shit-talks Enzo as well. Nikki doesn't know yet, but Aaron and Enzo used to be best friends. Almost straight up the same is happening with Nikki and Enzo, like it did with Aaron and Enzo. Aaron says that Enzo doesn't know a lot of things about him and his family, which is interesting because in books 4 to 6, Aaron specifically tells everything to Enzo, who later labels him as a weird guy. Aaron also mentions to Nikki about that he's feeling like a bad person and asks what makes somebody a bad person. Nikki doesn't exactly understand yet why is Aaron saying all of this basically just out of the blue. And later he comes to the conclusion that probably this is his dad telling this to his son and Aaron is believing this. And this is just not true and books 4 to 6 will confirm this. They end up at the conclusion that sometimes both of them go to places where they are not supposed to go.
Later.
Nikki either has nightmares or he has insomnia. There's no in between. He wakes up from his bed, it's like midnight or 2 a.m. or something like that, and he's hearing carnival music coming out of the Peterson basement. Nikki decides to lurk and see things for himself. That's the first time that he just casually creeps his way to the Peterson backyard without ever being invited. He tries to wake up Aaron by throwing a pebble against his window and he almost ends up breaking his window with this method. Nikki mentions Theodore's supersonic hearing, which is kind of a funny gag, knowing the fact that neighbor in the alphas indeed has a supersonic hearing and he hears from the other end of the map what the player is doing. On page 94, Nikki is already like hiding from the neighbor who is coming out because he made a noise and he is looking for whoever trespassed in their backyard. Like Nikki is slowly somehow making his way out without being noticed, but Theodore is very suspicious and Nikki describes this whole thing as if he was at least hunted down and about to be killed while basically nothing is happening. This is one of the great examples on how Nikki just makes things that are not as big to be huge. Later, the boys are progressing with their fantastic invention, namely the fart machine. I don't want to say these words ever again, so I will refer to it from now on as the FM. So the boys are making progress with the FM. Nikki receives a piece of paper later from Aaron's window. The piece of paper is saying that he's getting worse. Later, it turns out that it wasn't Aaron but Mia who was sending this message to Nikki, but he doesn't know it yet. Mia is actually referring to Theodore's mental state. You know, the mental state which the family is doing nothing about to make it better. They are not taking the man to a professional. They are not trying to help him the slightest. They are just crying for 6 books that he is getting worse. Like, no shit, mental illness is like any other illness, it must be treated. Later, Nikki does the research at the university library again. The Golden Apple amusement park opened in 1992, the 7th of August. It is also confirmed that Theodore was in fact a genius inventor. Food interrupts the main plot. By now, Nikki is also stealing articles from the library. He is collecting quite a lot of things under his bed. By the end of book 3, he will have a lot of quote-unquote evidence, a lot of scraps and a lot of trash, literally. Nikki is becoming Yagami Light, and he starts hiding these things elsewhere because he's paranoid that his family will find them. Spoiler, they will. Nikki is also reading about past tragedies that happened in other amusement parks that Theodore was designing. By all means, Theodore is just one gear in a very big machine, that is the machine which is building amusement parks. Blaming the failure of an entire amusement park, which is built by hundreds of people, is stupid, and scapegoating, which happens in the books later, instead of noting how corrupt and money-hungry the companies that order the building of these amusement parks are. And it is straight up confirmed by Carly. Again, later in the Aaron trilogy, it will be confirmed multiple times that the person who cared the most about the emergency brakes was Theodore himself, and everybody else, especially the investors, couldn't give less of a fuck about the emergency brakes. But Nikki doesn't know that, and the reader will get to know this just later. There was a young inventors club at some point, which Mia, Lucy, and Maritza were the parts of, and they had matching bracelets. Maritza is Enzo's younger sister. I will refer to her as Mari later on, and Mari just hates Theodore, but it's for a reason I will tell about later. Not much later, Nikki has a sleepover at the Peterson house. He's invited by Aaron, and they are hanging out together. Nikki once again describes how this old big house is like a maze. This kid just has a hatred for big houses and big men for some reason. Aaron is also showing him some very well hidden stuff in a secret part of his drawer as well, so there are two Yagami Lights in the plot now. Aaron is just as unhinged as Nikki, and their way of thinking is very similar. Nikki is happy that he finally found somebody who is just as crazy as him and somebody who understands him. They actually have a very nice brother-like friendship in the books. It is very interesting how once the Petersons have burger, then later pizza for dinner. I guess you figured that where I live, this is not really a thing. Nikki is still unable to get Aaron to openly talk about the Golden Apple amusement park accident or his father's mental state. At night, Nikki sneaks out of Aaron's room, obviously, to have a glass of water. He ends up wandering to Theodore's office. Instead of getting his ass out of the place that he is not supposed to be in, he just starts lurking around and looking at the notes that the man has on his desk. It is also a very interesting retcon that Nikki is finding Theodore's office upstairs, because he does. In books 4 to 6, it is mentioned that Theodore entirely moved his office underground to the basement because his family kept doing the same. They non-stop kept lurking and he got tired of it, so he just isolated himself. Anyway, Nikki discovers that Theodore was sued because of Lucy's death and that he is the one that people keep blaming. Nikki starts going down on a false route where, according to him, everything is Theodore's fault, and up until the end of book 3, where it turns out to be a false statement, this will be the case. This is why the reader must have critical thinking once again and question the point of view of a child. Nikki thinks that Theodore is terrorizing his family and stuff like that. In later books, which are from Aaron's perspective, it is shown that this is basically the opposite. Nikki discovers that the Golden Apple amusement park opened ahead of schedule, which is a very important detail in the books. This is straight up a hint to the amusement park's building being rushed and the fact that no safety checks were done. Nikki finds photos of Theodore being present at the construction site of the amusement park, which is not a surprise because he's an engineer, the planner of these attractions that they are building. And Aaron is also hiding in a bush or in a corner in the background on each and every photo. Aaron is circled and the word omen is written with red ink. This is another interesting detail because here in this case, Nikki is telling the reader that it must be Theodore having some shit against his own son and treating him as an omen, the cause of bad things. Later, this thought goes as far as Nikki thinking that Theodore murdered Aaron because he thinks that there's no other explanation on why Aaron just suddenly disappeared. Carly will confirm that none of this is true and Nikki is on a wrong track. There's a very high chance that Aaron, yes, Aaron wrote the word omen and circled himself on the pictures, and it's on Theodore's desk because he found these pictures and he took it from his son along with other things which happens in books 4 to 6. Theodore never once will blame Aaron for anything. Aaron is certain and mentions multiple times that he thinks that he is the cause of bad things that happen to his family. Of course, Nikki ending up in Theodore's office, and this lurking comes to an end with Theodore appearing behind the child and telling him the simple fact that he shouldn't be here. Just imagine that a 12 years old child from your neighborhood is snooping around and he's reading the stuff that has nothing to do with him. Nikki mentions to the reader that Theodore came from the basement and he is fully clothed. He isn't sleeping. This is the conclusion. Like, he is working down in the basement. Theodore ends up laughing. For some reason, for Carly, this insane laughter is pretty much the confirmation of a character being insane, and Theodore tells Nikki nighty-night, but for the love of God, he doesn't do anything else. Nikki, assuming that Theodore is capable of murdering people, hurting others, this is entirely some made up by Nikki's brain just from the mere fact that Theodore is a big scary looking man, like he is 2 meters tall or something like that in the books too. Nikki dashes back to Aaron's room as one should and forgets that he wanted a glass of water. Later Nikki visits Aaron, like he knocks on the door like a normal person does, and Theodore opens the door and he tells Nikki that Aaron isn't there. Nikki once again describes Theodore's eyes as something that want him gone and burn a hole to his chest, so Nikki quickly gets his ass out of the Peterson property. The FM from earlier is once again detailed for the reader in case you were forgetting about that machine. The boys end up doing the FM prank in the grocery store. It's a small grocery store from the game. They end up making fart sounds coming out of the speakers and they obviously end up getting caught. Police officer Keith, of all people, appears. I'm not sure what happened here, like canon-wise. I'm absolutely certain that Nielsen and the mentioned police officer in the books were different characters. Later, for some reason, they were merged into one character. Our only profit from this FM prank is that we get to know the full name of the kids and the exact date, which is 1995. On page 156, Nikki seriously mentions food jokes after mentioning a person's death. Due to this sick prank that they pulled with Aaron, now Nikki is in detention. Food! A bit later, Nikki's parents send their child to Enzo because they probably realized that Aaron is a very bad influence to the boy. Enzo does nothing but plays video games and does other boring stuff, so he's nothing like Aaron. He still refuses to openly talk about Aaron as well. We get to know that Mari and Mia are the same age 10. Enzo also tells Nikki why they hate Theodore so much, like family-wise, on page 163. So the thing is that after the Lucy accident, Theodore, for some reason, told the following quote to Mari: "Have you seen Lucy flying? She flew like an angel." This piece of information exists for one purpose only, and is to show that sometimes Theodore isn't himself. Later on, Nikki decides to break into the Golden Apple factory once again, to the place where they just had a little corner with Aaron. The funny thing is the Mayak, the metal station, doesn't get mentioned until the very end of book 3, despite it is right next to the factory and the park. Two kids who are generally interested in urban exploration just don't give a shit about an abandoned metal station. Sure. Writing wise, obviously this wasn't a thing until the Hello Guest prototype times, which is I don't know, around 2019 or something like that. So later they tried to put it into the book, pretending that it was always there. Nikki finds a VHS tape in the factory that he thinks is a knockoff Joe's movie, the horror movie which they wanted to watch with Aaron, but it turns out the VHS tape was recorded on, which means that something else overwrote the movie itself. The VHS tape ends up showing the opening day of the Golden Apple amusement park. Then it cuts to Diane dancing in one of the Peterson house's rooms. It's a family recording. Mia is the one who is filming her. Theodore joins in the scene and starts dancing with Diane. It is a nice family moment, and suddenly Aaron cuts off the music his mother is dancing to for absolutely no reason. This makes Theodore angry, and he calls out the kid for such action. He asks why is Aaron always creeping around, like he was in fact creeping around, just saying. Theodore is later really well aware of Aaron working against him and his plans, even though first in books 4 to 6 it is very accidental. But later you will see in Hello Neighbor 2 with the paper planes as well that it isn't accidental. I wanted to tell that detail about the VHS this way because the way Nikki describes it is misleading. Nikki is already going on wrong clues, so I don't want to mislead you guys. I want to kind of hint that he is on the wrong track and not just shock you in the end of book 3 that things don't happen the way Nikki thinks they happen. Good luck for a younger reader to bring this conclusion. Nikki is stating that the Peterson family does know and always knew about the fact that Theodore is crazy, but they do nothing about it. I said earlier that it's up to the healthy people to help a mentally ill person. Theodore has a biggest family as described in the books, outside of his wife too and his kids too, and nobody is helping him at all. They are just crying non-stop that his state is getting worse, which is a normal thing to get worse if you are sick. It does, and nobody is helping him, so I don't understand why are they crying. A bit later, Nikki gets called to the Golden Apple amusement park by 11 p.m. He once again is getting a note that appears on Aaron's window, and he thinks it's Aaron calling him in a very, very painfully long process, like tens of pages. It is finally revealed that the note wasn't written by Aaron but Mia. Mia, who is expecting Nikki to understand what her family is going through, like mainly mentally and trauma-wise. She thinks that Nikki is different and he would understand. Mia is 10 years old, so yeah, I guess she expects some help. What help? Yes. Nikki also acquires a bracelet, the same bracelet that Mia, Lucy and Marie used to have. It doesn't matter, it's just that one of the bracelets is in Nikki's possession. The bracelet has a tiny golden apple on it because it's submerged from the park. Back to Mia. It's in fact confirmed that she wrote the "he is getting worse" message as well. She quickly figures out that Nikki in fact cannot help because he is 12 years old, and she says that Nikki is like everybody else and he doesn't understand the Petersons and their struggles. Mia slowly backs off before Nikki could communicate with her properly and leaves the scene very quickly after realizing that Nikki isn't going to help them. A bit later in the morning, Nikki's parents tell Nikki that Theodore's wife, Diane, died. There's a funeral meeting at the Peterson house, which half of the town is going to, including the Roth family. Food! Nikki unwillingly witnesses the Alpha 3 ending, which has to do absolutely nothing with this storyline. But the way it is described, it is technically the Alpha 3 ending, just in a different room. And the difference is that Theodore stands in front of the mirror and begs to somebody invisible to make it stop. Theodore is crazy, like it was mentioned 5 times already. He needs help, we know. Nikki then meets Aaron, who is coming from another room. Aaron is in a full villain mode for some reason, and he is oddly calm. He says that to him, his father looks very fine. That was the moment I really started suspecting that Nikki's point of view is quite inaccurate, and something seriously disturbing is going on with Theodore, who is in fact in the status of a suffering character throughout the books. Mind you, this is after Mia's death as well. It is never mentioned by the books, but we know from hide and seek that this is the case. Nikki asks about Mia's whereabouts, but he is not getting a straight answer. The title of the book is said. It will be a returning element in the books that the title is straight up said. Aaron tells Nikki to not come back. Obviously, Nikki first doesn't understand his whole sentence. It will make sense later, but he then proceeds to do the absolute opposite. Later on, the Ross go to some rally event where Nikki gets to know the secret neighbor kids, namely just Trinity and Maritza. Inventor, Beggar, and Scout aren't in the books. Nikki then gets home, but his parents are out of the house being parents. Nikki has a returning nightmare about this grocery shopping, and it is revealed that his grandmother left him here as soon as the parents discovered that they dashed to find their child in a closed supermarket, and Nikki was never left with his grandmother ever again after this event. Nikki wakes up from this nightmare and he decides to once again creep to the Peterson house. Why? Yes, he basically kind of has a ladder leading down from his window to the front yard. He can just casually do this without being noticed. So he creeps to the Peterson yard and there's a piece of paper. He thinks that it was left by Aaron, and on the note Aaron says, "I make bad things happen." And with this the first book ends. The second book takes place months after book 1. It is now December. At night, Nikki finds himself in the abandoned golden apple factory and he doesn't know how did he get here. He is suspecting that he is sleepwalking. He realizes that he probably climbs down on the ladder that I just talked about and basically just reaches their porch, and from that he is free to go. Nikki by now has an entire stolen article collection about the Golden Apple amusement park accident and the Peterson family. In these articles, people keep blaming one and only person for the accidents, even though I said that you cannot blame one person for the work of hundreds. By now, Nikki also has a schedule of Theodore's weekly routine. I will let that sink in. Now that Mia is out of the picture, and I'm wording it like that on purpose, Nikki has a new girl on the horizon, which is Maritza. Mind you, she's like 10 years old and not more, and Nikki is 12 years old. Luckily, it doesn't affect the main plot, so it's thankfully not as annoying, so I will move further. There's a lot of filler parts about Nikki's school life. I'm not going to details about this. He talks about his friends, but plot-wise it doesn't matter. He's now friends with Mari, Enzo, and Trinity only, but all Nikki does is non-stop thinking about the Petersons. I will show you how many times Nikki does mention the Peterson name in the books. Nikki's parents don't suspect what their son is doing. They don't know about anything. They only know that Aaron and Nikki were best friends, and now Nikki is quite sad they didn't meet for months. He knows nothing about him. On page 27, a company named Earth Pro comes to the town and to the picture. They eventually get the land of the Golden Apple amusement park and the land of the factory. They are planning to build a huge mall in the place of them. Later, this company is mentioned many times and not in good context because all they want is money for themselves. They are putting the locals out of their jobs. There is a boring family plot after this, and Nikki is once again just thinking about the Peterson family. Nikki returns to the Golden Apple factory, but there's a fence built around the park and the factory now, so he has to climb that. And during his explorations, because yes, Nikki does in fact progress, fence or not, he comes across drawings. Oh, and of course, like in every horror, it is raining and the weather is shit. While trying to escape, because he is disturbed, obviously, Nikki comes across a huge mannequin, which is said to be very big and around 90 kilograms. This will be important later. As always, Nikki is running for his life. Soon after he discovered something, this will be a returning plot element in the books. Upon arriving home, terrified, Nikki realizes that his parents are once again out being parents. His 12-year-old child is once again on his own in a big house. Nikki has yet another nightmare, and now he finds himself in the grass outside, waking up. At least he's touching some grass because he really needs it by now. But now Nikki overhears his dad arguing with Enzo's dad on the phone, who apparently now does want to drag Theodore into the mud by trying to write yet another "oh, it's his fault, he is to be blamed" article, while Nikki's dad doesn't. He's kind of defending Theodore, so he's a gigachat for that. For some reason, Nikki's dad believes that Theodore isn't the cause of everything bad that has ever happened in human history. And also, they have no real evidence of Peterson being the fault of things. Now, to explain where Aaron and Mia are to the public, story has it that Aaron and Mia were sent away, like states away, to their aunt named Aunt Lisa. She will be mentioned in the books later, and they live with her now. In theory, Theodore is on his own. This is told to the public, but obviously the kids don't believe this for a second. Nikki is certain that Aaron and Mia by now died. He eventually ends up telling everything about this Peterson case to his dad, since his dad is now involved with the article that I mentioned earlier. But here the stupid parent cliche is applied, because his dad tells him that he doesn't believe his own son. While going to the Golden Apple amusement park, once again, Nikki is meeting Murray, who is straight up questioning what Nikki has been wondering about. Are the Peterson kids indeed staying at their own? Both agree on that this is probably a lie and they have to find out what is really happening. They spot Theodore in the Golden Apple amusement park taking pieces of the attractions with himself, like metal and wires and smaller stuff like that. What a coincidence that they were at the same time at the same place. I will tell you what the kids don't know yet. Theodore is taking pieces because he will use them for something in his basement that he is building. The kids overhear Theodore talking to himself, which is sad, if anything. As always in these scenes where the kids are discovering something and lurking, Theodore eventually does notice them. He says yet another very infamous sentence, which is, "Kids come play." He doesn't do anything to them. He's just saying this. He isn't himself at this point, and the kids run away. Theodore isn't even chasing them or anything. A bit later, Nikki and Murray tell the news from the Golden Apple amusement park to Enzo. Trinity also joins in and says that they need more evidence to know what actually happened to Aaron and Mia. Enzo is angry at Murray because she keeps escaping and going to the Golden Apple amusement park. Nikki confirms that Theodore is in fact crazy. I didn't count, but he confirmed it like 5 times already. They mention Lisa Peterson, who I just told about earlier. She was at the funeral and she talked with Mrs. Tillman, owner of the grocery store where the kids did the fart machine joke and got caught. So Trinity and Murray decide to ask Mrs. Tillman about Lisa Peterson. A bit later, there's a holiday event in the Ravenbrooks banner. Food! At this event, Nikki meets Enzo and he tells him everything and he expects him to stand by their side, but Enzo is pretty much like distancing himself. He just wants the Golden Apple amusement park to be demolished and the factory to be destroyed, and he wants to move on and forget that anything has ever happened in the past. Nikki is quite surprised that Enzo is a shithead, but I'm not. Lucy's mom ends up speaking and she confirms that everything from the land, like the Golden Apple amusement park and the factory, will be gone in less than 3 months, which is obviously shocking Nikki because it means that the evidence and the memories will be destroyed. After this, the pointless argument between Enzo and Nikki continues, but it doesn't go anywhere. There's also a side plot about Nikki going into details about her grandmother in fact being crazy. One thing she was probably right about is that Nikki will get in trouble if he keeps wandering away, and he does. Later, Nikki is meeting Murray and Trinity at a farmer's market because Ravenbrooks has a farmer market as well. They figure out that the Petersons had a flower-patterned address book with numbers in them. And they decide to break in to the Peterson house and get that address book, which has Lisa Peterson's phone number in it. So 1 week later, they do this plan. Mary stays outside because she is young, and somebody must watch over Peterson in case he is coming back. So Trinity is breaking in with Nikki. Nikki exactly knows Theodore's Sunday routine by now. In case you wanted to know, on Sundays, Theodore Peterson goes to drive his car by 3 p.m. So basically the kids break in and they trip and trap and do stuff. Obviously, Theodore comes home earlier than expected. Maritza is like giving them signs and they're like, oh my god, we have to flee because Theodore is coming to his very own home. Trinity ends up fleeing somehow, but Nikki gets stuck in the house for some reason. Theodore isn't entirely crazy though. He's quite smart because he puts a scotch tape to the door lock. So basically, if anybody happens to open the door, the scotch tape tears apart and it will be revealed that somebody opened the door. I wonder where did Carly know this from, because this is quite cool. So Theodore comes home and he checks the scotch tape and yes, it was torn apart. So somebody did open the door and is probably in the house or was in the house. Nikki cannot escape for some reason. I mean, obviously because plot, and he decides to hide in a closet of all things. And the most dramatic moment in the trilogy happens. Nikki witnesses as Theodore chops raw meat. He's also singing a song named Tom Tom the Piper's Son. I have no relation to this song and I didn't exactly understand how it's related to Nikki, but whatever. Singing a song may make this scene a bit more horrifying, but what is actually happening is that Theodore is singing while preparing food in the kitchen, and Nikki is thinking that all the possible and impossible horror that will never happen to him. Peterson is then disturbed by the doorbell. Murray paid some money to a person to distract Peterson so Nikki can escape, and he does. He quickly grabs the address book and he escapes through a window. The kids end up calling Aunt Lisa, who accidentally confirms that the children aren't with her. However, Carly unwillingly confirms that Lisa is also aware of Theodore being crazy and does nothing to help him. Then Lisa hangs up on the kids when they tell her they want to know their location because Aaron and Mia, they just disappeared. And with this, Nikki's anger issues begin and will not end until book 3 when the truth is revealed. Much later, the kids want to get even more evidence against Theodore. The kids being Nikki and the girls, they need a camera. They eventually get it. That night, conveniently, Nikki's parents once again leave their child entirely alone on his own, and it's a great opportunity for the kids to sneak after Theodore and take photos of him doing stuff. They are following Peterson down the road, who is carrying a shovel. He goes to the Golden Apple amusement park. They are taking photos of him on the go. What they seem to witness is that Theodore is digging out Mia's corpse and crying over her corpse. The thing is, in the books, Mia isn't digged in the backyard because Theodore is very well aware that Nikki is non-stop snooping and eventually digging stuff up from the man's garden, like in Hello Neighbor Diaries. Theodore decides to hide Mia's body in the Golden Apple amusement park because in theory nobody is going there but him. It is never straight up confirmed that this is the case, but it is very, very strongly hinted. Kids don't exactly see what or who is Theodore talking to, they just see an arm. But he's incredibly sad and he's crying, so we can probably guess that it was in fact Mia. As always, in scenes with the camera included, the kids do something in a hurry and the camera is flashing and Theodore notices them. They start running and now he chases them down while singing the same song he was singing earlier in the kitchen. He's not yelling or anything. He is just singing. But I have to ask here, what would have he done if he caught the kids? You have to know that in the books, Nicky is just hallucinating stuff that he will be killed and butchered and whatever, but Theodore is not hurting a fly in the books. Maybe he would take the camera, but I think that's the worst thing that could happen to the kids. We don't get to know any of this because while chasing them, he stumbles into llamas. He gets disturbed and he cannot chase the kids anymore. It doesn't really matter how it happens.
Later.
Nicky tells his father that they now have evidence against Theodore because they followed him to the amusement park at night and took pictures of him. I wanted to see the face of Nicky's father when his son told him this. The photos are printed and they are good quality, so you can see what's happening on them. And just in time, Enzo is joining the girls and Nicky, and they end up telling to Enzo's father what is happening, and they are showing the pictures and the evidence. Food! And there's actual progress because Enzo's father takes the kids seriously and tells them to stay away from Theodore Peterson because from that point, this is the adults' stuff to do. Of course, where were they until now? Nicky has yet another nightmare that night. He's in a roller coaster car with Lucy. The police finally arrives at the Ross house, but the cops were called because Nicky broke into the Peterson house and stuff like that, not because the evidence that they were showing to Enzo's father. The thing is, if Nicky was an adult doing what he does in these books, he would be sitting in prison already for months. They clear things up and the police talks with Nicky's father, and Nicky's father ends up talking with his son. Food! And then they kind of change the topic, and Nicky confirms to his father that he wants to be an engineer when he grows up. The next day, despite everything, Nicky is a bit relieved until he realizes that he cannot find the flower patterned address book that he stole from Theodore the other week. Food! Nicky's mother says that they raided the Peterson house overnight. Then the parents and their children go to the police station, like Nicky's family and Enzo's family. The police confirms that they indeed found some stuff stolen from the Golden Apple amusement park. They said swiper, no swiping, and that was it. They didn't find anything else. Nicky asks about the buried body, but by the time the police dug up the hole, it was replaced with a mannequin. So they say that it was a sick prank. They couldn't take a good picture of this one. There's basically no evidence to it being a corpse to begin with. The kids really try to convince the police, but to put it simply, the police couldn't give less of a f***. Nicky sneaks out that night and goes to the Golden Apple amusement park where they already got the bulldozers ready. Basically, every evidence by that time is gone. He cannot collect anything else. There were weird drawings he found. There was some makeshift office mentioned, and there was a VHS about the Peterson family that will be gone as well. When getting home with anger and tears, Nicky hears Theodore singing, and Theodore waits until the kid sees him. Nicky realizes that he's kind of getting what he gave to the man, because Theodore in fact broke into his room earlier when he wasn't home and stole the address book back. So the book ends like this. In the third book, we get to know that Nicky in fact hated his so-mentioned grandmother. Nicky now mentions a therapist that he goes to get over this Aaron and Mia topic. They make a new inventors club with Enzo, Trinity and Maritza. They name it the Emu. It's Nicky's birthday sometime around summer. Probably it is in July because it's mentioned that there's 7 weeks left from the summer. Nicky and his friends, Trinity, Enzo and Maritza, are driven to a random amusement park far away and they celebrate Nicky's birthday. They go to a ride called Scream School. The setup of this ride is something similar to Fear School, so it's technically the same thing. There's even mannequins and such, because apparently this ride was as well built by Theodore. For some reason, it is Peterson himself who is narrating the events of the ride. So Nikki is like, oh my god, I can hear him even here. Yes, you can, because it is him narrating the ride. I must mention that Theodore does absolutely fucking cool rides, like the way they are described in the book. I would love to check them out. Nikki could swear that he sees Peterson lurking in the shadows. When the ride is over, Nikki's friend finds a missing poster of the Peterson kids on Nikki's seat next to him. On the back of these missing posters, there's always a different drawing that will lead Nikki throughout the book and hint him things. These artworks are possibly drawn by Aaron, and this current drawing shows a tree that Nikki keeps finding himself under in his nightmares. I don't know how did Aaron know this. Next up, the kids are having sushi in a sushi bar, which is a very weird place to be at in the 90s. I thought in the 90s in America these animatronic restaurants were still a thing for children, but whatever. Nikki can't stop mentioning Theodore's name every second sentence. It's getting annoying. So apparently there's now missing posters about the Peterson kids put up on the streets like in the end of the game. Now the story is that the kids fled from their aunt and they might attempt to come home to their father. So now this is the story towards the public. Nikki can't let the whole topic with the Petersons go, and his friends are really getting tired of it all. It's a classic plot point. Upon arriving home, Nikki spots the light of a flashlight coming from Aaron's room, and Trinity is there with him too, so the two of them witness it. And whoever is doing the SOS sign with the flashlight doesn't know how to write an SOS with Morse codes, because in the book it is described wrong. This is the code of the SOS sign, by the way. Nikki is like, okay, you saw that too, Trinity? Yes, I saw that too. And Nikki goes home and food. That night, Nicholas randomly decides to do the funny. He makes his way to the Petersons' backyard and he starts digging up random dirt. The magnet is included in the story too, because yes. So basically Nikki is doing what he does in Hello Neighbor Diaries in the backyard. He ends up finding a box full of shattered VHS tape. So he finds the VHS pieces that for some reason are just only shattered. He ends up stealing them. He thinks he can repair it and watch whatever is on them. There's a reason why these VHS tapes are broken into pieces and buried into the ground. Nikki absolutely rightfully hears Theodore coming outside to check his backyard, like, who is at my backyard? Wow, I wonder who it is. He leaves in a hurry and saves the VHS tapes. The next day, the newspaper tells about a prank with a mannequin in the grocery store. The prank is that one of these 90-kilogram mannequins were put in the office chair and it shocked everyone. And whoever put it there was certain that Nikki will want to examine it, which he does with his friends. They go to the office and despite it was taped with a police tape, so they are entering a police scene, they just have to see it. So they turn the chair and the mannequin is sitting in the chair and there's a very weird face drawn and they go like, ah! The others, like Trinity, are starting to deny things. Like Trinity was present the other day when they saw the bad Morse code being shown with a flashlight through Aaron's window, but Trinity is now denying that she saw that. They go as far as blaming Nikki for the whole mannequin prank, which Nikki says is insanity because there's no way he could have moved a 90-kilogram mannequin on his own. The kids believe that Nikki wants the Peterson case to keep going and he's faking evidence to make Theodore look guilty. The next day, Nikki wakes up from yet another nightmare. This time he was chasing Aaron in quite a dramatical way, and there's a pointless argument between the kids, now rather the teens, because they're like 13 years old. Nikki is confirmed to be 13 years old and so are his friends except Maritza, but this argument leads to nowhere. Nikki examines the broken VHS tape pieces that he stole the other night from the Peterson backyard, and he comes to the conclusion that they must be family tapes from the Petersons, just like the one he saw at the Golden Apple Factory's office. He realizes that he needs tools from the factory that is about to be demolished, Later on, Nikki meets Maritza because apparently they are on bad terms too. I couldn't care less. Mari tells him what I told earlier, is that her and the others think that Nikki is doing all of this to keep Peterson suspicious and he's faking evidence and such.
Later.
Nikki and Enzo go and meet an Earth Pro person few days later who is responsible for the demolishing of the park. Enzo is really into the whole Earth Pro company to the point he volunteers to clean up the Golden Apple factory for free, which is very weird because why would you clean up a place that will be destroyed? But the plot gives Nikki an opportunity to go there, and while they are there like swiping, the topic of the tapes and the restoration of these VHS tapes is brought up, but Enzo straight up calls Nikki crazy and he wants to be left alone with this. The rumors that they are making up against Nikki, like him faking evidence, are working. On his way home from the factory, Nikki finds yet another missing poster with a drawing on its back. Sometime later, the Roth family goes to this Earth Pro opening ceremony. The Teens Inventor Club that they just made a few weeks ago is collapsing. They have a lot of arguments that go basically nowhere because they are non-stop getting disturbed. Finally, in the recent argument, Nikki ends up crashing out. He's raging. He's just ranting at his friends and everybody overhears because they are at the event and Nikki is very loud. Nikki comes to the conclusion that him and Theodore are getting the very same treatment. They are labeled to be crazy. Nikki then runs away from this Earth Pro event in anger and ends up finding out that the Golden Apple amusement park and everything around it is completely gone. On his way home, he finds yet another missing poster with another drawing and two more. These are a ballerina and a red key. Nikki's like, and he climbs a tree which leads to Aaron's room. He opens his window and he just hops into Aaron's room to investigate. In the room, there's a lot of missing posters and each missing poster have a drawing on their back. Even in such horrible scenario, Nikki thinks about food. Nikki then goes to Aaron's bed and he pulls the blanket because somebody is laying on the bed and he finds the same mannequin from the grocery store prank. First, he is so shocked that he doesn't even notice the little music box on the mannequin's chest, which is a clue on its own, but later he does. Inside the music box with the ballerina, there's the red key. To the surprise of nobody but Nicholas, the owner of the house shows up in the room. Nikki starts a staring contest with Theodore, who does nothing. He could easily hurt Nikki at this point because Nikki is technically trapped, but it is confirmed and detailed in the books that he doesn't. He doesn't even move. He just looks at Nikki. He just ends up laughing because crazy man is laughing, and he allows Nikki to escape the room. And Nikki's like hopping on the tree and he's sliding down and he's running away and Theodore is doing nothing. The next day, Nikki wakes up to chopping because Theodore chops the tree which was leading to Aaron's room in a quite detailed way. Food! There's also a plane crash that Theodore apparently had sometime in the past on an island. This just never gets mentioned ever again. So later on, Nikki is trying to fix VHS tapes and now Theodore knows that Nikki stole them. He somehow ends up fixing them and tries to get back to the factory because for some reason, only that TV in the factory is capable of playing them. Plot is kind of disturbed by the llamas and the llama owner again. The Maya is mentioned, but so casually, like no one gives a fuck about it. It just had to be there. Nikki finds the factory and their corner untouched, which is very surprising knowing the current state of that land. And he finishes fixing the VHS tapes, but food. There are 4 tapes in total. Each of them have a family video of the Petersons. 3 of them have dates. It doesn't matter what date. The 4th is like unnamed. All of these videos were recorded by Mia, except the end of the last one. The first tape shows Aaron drawing in his room. Mia is happily approaching him with the camera, but then Aaron just ruins their mood entirely by showing that the drawing that he is drawing is about the crashed roller coaster car that Lucy died in. The second tape shows Mia dancing in her room because apparently they have separate rooms with Aaron in this universe. Mia is dancing in the room to the music the little little music box provides with the ballerina on top of it, which had the red key. She mimics her mother while she's dancing. She suddenly stops and starts moving with the camera because she overhears her parents arguing down there. Basically, the argument is Diane calling Theodore paranoid. Theodore thinks that his family is against him too, and honestly, in the later book, it becomes crystal clear that he isn't entirely wrong about this statement. For some reason, Nikki stops watching the tapes. Like, yeah, I too leave the missing pieces I have been searching for months in an abandoned factory that has a chance to be demolished in any moment. Sure. On his way home, Nikki witnesses the Hello Neighbor starting scene, except it's at night and the weather is shitty. He finds a little colorful ball, the BP baby ball, and kicks into it. Except when he sees that Theodore closes someone to the basement, he doesn't do anything. They just have another staring contest with the man, and Nicky goes to his own house, and he feels Peterson's look on his back. This differently written scene just retconned basically every second thing in Hello Neighbor, the game. But in their house, Nicky finds everybody in his room. His parents, the police, and his so-called friends, who technically don't add much to the plot in the overall endgame. The parents found everything Nicky has been hiding in the room in the past 2 books: the missing posters, his inventions, the clues, and apparently Peterson's trash. Did I say that Nicky even captures Theodore's trash and he digs in it and he keeps it? No, now I'm saying it. Nicky ends up in one misunderstanding after another, just like Theodore did. There's shockingly much similarities between them, and I'm glad it was written this way, because sooner or later Nicky does realize what he keeps doing, just because back then he looked at him and he immediately decided that he's a cartoon villain. So like, he's getting karma. The parents are suddenly really involving themselves in the whole topic. Good timing, I have to say. If only they cared until now, we maybe wouldn't end up here. Nicky is now suspected by the police that he has something to do with the disappearance with Aaron and Mia. How? Yes, but the police is so smart, they just straight up accuse a teenager with this. Enzo ends up defending Nicky about this. Nicky by now figures something out. It was Theodore who set up a trap to make him look crazy, to make him look like a suspect, and put Theodore out of the picture with everything. At least that's what Nicky is thinking. By the way, Nicky's so-called friends are there because they originally were coming to apologize for their behavior, but they ended up doubling down, and now they entirely really hate him. So Nicky does what everybody should do in such case and decides to walk into the trap. Nicky goes back to the factory that night and finishes watching the tapes. That's where the last false clue leads him into the giant misunderstanding of the year. Like, it is an award-winning misunderstanding. The third reel, like Mia snooping down to the basement where her father's office is set up, and she's recording everything. There's that carnival music coming out of the basement, which Nicky keeps hearing, and it's Theodore's office in the basement. He's talking to himself, and he's trying to make up plans to fix the dangerous rides that failed in the park, but none of his ideas seem to work already on the field of theories. He's repeating that it's not his fault, so like, he's clearly insane, and that's when he notices Mia, who flees in pain. I don't think he was going to hurt her anyway. Maybe Mia was just like scared by the state of her father. He doesn't hurt anybody he likes in 6 books. You have to keep this in mind. And there's that one last VHS tape. These tapes were all recorded onto like movies, so there's a weird overlay from the movie to a family tape, which is very creepy. So the last tape shows similar scenes to the ones that we see in the hide and seek cutscenes. The first scene is Mia happily running away from somebody in the hallway in the Peterson house that Nicky cannot recognize, but it's the Peterson house. There's a switch and the camera suddenly cuts to her standing on the roof. Yes, on the roof with camera in her hands, and Nicky mentions that he can even see their own house. And despite Mia is laughing, there is something else in her voice as it's described. Here I must ask Carly, how could she write any kind of laughter and humor into these scenes, because there is some. This was filmed right after their mother died. There's no way the kids just laughed for a second. And here is the little mystery mistake that Nikki does. He thinks that it is Theodore who Mia is running away from. He is completely misunderstanding the whole scene and misleading the reader who doesn't know the ending of hide and seek and how it happens. So Nikki is saying that it was Theodore who went from a funny, joking dad to a suddenly frightening monster, and this is who Mia was afraid of. Mia says she doesn't want to play anymore, and then Nikki sees the truth. Mia fell off the roof with the camera in her hand, filming her own death. The camera ends up in the grass, and Mia's motionless hand is seen on it. Somebody runs to Mia, calling her name multiple times, but Nikki is unable to recognize the voice. Mia is dead, and the tape shows a dark screen, and Nikki thinks it's over, but then the tape continues. The tape shows the basement now. Somebody carries the camera down there. It shows a locked door, and finally it is put on Theodore's working desk. Aaron stands in front of somebody, we don't see who, and calls them a monster. Nikki completely fails to understand the scene because he doesn't see everything, and he immediately thinks that Theodore was the one who pushed Mia off the roof, and it was Theodore who Aaron called a monster. This is Nikki's conclusion in the end of the chapter. This thought is not true, and later Carly clears it up entirely. So in the final chapters, led by the complete misunderstanding he himself has gotten himself into, 13 years old Nikki Roth gets into killer mode. He straight up wants to murder Theodore Peterson, a grown adult. He straight up goes to the Peterson house to kill the man. Obviously, there's a storm now. He breaks Aaron's room with the BP baby ball, and he makes his way up to the room via stacking boxes. He hardly but succeeds, and he manages to jump into Aaron's room. Peterson by now did changes to the house, and he's slowly transforming it into the Act 2 house because plot. Nikki opens the basement door with the red key. He enters, and to nobody's surprise, the door behind him is shut and locked. Having no other option and not even a plan on how to do this whole thing, he just proceeds in the basement, and he finds the entrance inside the washing machine and climbs in. This is when he feels a gentle push, and once again he is stuck at the place where he ended up. He finds a room that's apparently Aaron's sleeping room. He breaks one of the windows and he progresses in the basement just like you do in Act 1, and the book describes the Act 1 basement more or less with smaller changes. There's even that mannequin who is holding a flashlight that Nikki ends up taking with himself. And at the end of the corridor, where you run from Theodore in Act 1 ending and he catches you. So like at the end of the corridor, finally Theodore is appearing, but he is just standing. Nikki runs away, even though Theodore still doesn't do shit, but I guess Nikki realized how bad of an idea was that to come here. He probably realized the fact that in the Peterson house, he will eventually find Peterson himself. Nikki ends up running at the corridor, and he gets to the three-lock store where Act 1 actually ends, but he tries to break the locks with the flashlight here. Meanwhile, Theodore just slowly approaches, like he's walking towards him very slowly. He doesn't run or anything, and Nikki somehow manages to open this three-lock door, and he dashes through it and shuts it. Poof, a retcon. He finds Theodore's office behind this three-lock door, and he starts reading the man's notes. It's hard to understand what he's writing because he's crazy, ha 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 ha. Nikki sees this omen thing, and he brings the conclusion with an absolute outsider's eye that it was Theodore, but we don't get to know what's the deal with this. But finally, Nikki does realize that it wasn't Theodore who Aaron told to on the VHS recording that he's a monster, because there's a mirror on the desk, and Aaron was standing in front of this mirror when he was talking to somebody, and this somebody was himself. Aaron told to himself that he is a monster. This is further proven because this was not much after Mia died. You know, not much after Theodore was given the horrible task to bury his own daughter's body, carefully away from all eyes. And it was only Aaron in the basement with the camera during that time. Now you understand why all those tapes were shattered. Theodore probably washed and buried them after tearing them apart. I think it was him burying it. Nikki finally realizes that it was Aaron who pushed Mia off the roof. He calls it an accident even later on. Then he progresses in the basement because some things still don't add up and now he wants answers. In another room, he finds two memorials. One is for Diane. It's her picture full of candles and fresh flowers. And the other memorial is for Mia. And I hope by now everybody is feeling like shit for the Petersons, because actually seeing this, it is horrifying how many terrible things they have to go through. Nicky even wants to stay at this place forever, but then he somehow forces himself to progress. The end of this book is very, very well written. Finally, Nicky ends up in a huge underground room, and at this place, Theodore just finished building an underground amusement park for him and his son Aaron. From all the pieces that he could gather from the Golden Apple amusement park's ruins, Theodore just built his own park. And Peterson even starts speaking through the speakers to Nicky as if they were in an actual amusement park, like he's not himself again. Carly did a funny here because Theodore, out of all things, calls Nicky like Nicky my boy. This book is very well written in the end, and it perfectly describes Theodore's mental state and the whole scene that is insanity. Here Nicky is attempting to escape, but he's failing. He cannot escape from this amusement park anymore. And this is the moment that Nicky finally stumbles into Aaron just standing in the middle of this literal madness. And Aaron states that, hinting that Theodore just kind of lured Nicky here to have Aaron a friend and he won't be alone. Either it was him or him and Aaron who set up this lure to bring Nicky here, because they just knew that if Nicky is told to not come back again, he will come back, of course. So Aaron can finally have a friend who stays with him and doesn't betray him, which happened before with his other friends. And this is the moment when Nicky realizes that he left no trail, like no trail to the point people on the surface won't even suspect that he's down here in the Peterson basement. His family and his friends would think that he ran away after what happened to him, and nobody would ever search him down here. He wanted to know so much about the Petersons, he ended up becoming part of this messed up family. He kind of seems to be like accepting this surprise adoption. It's actually very shocking how this book ends, because this is how the book and the trilogy ends. He now knows their secrets because he wanted to. He now knows what happened to the family because he desperately wanted to. But with all of this adding together, it's impossible to match the games and the book's lore. Just like in the case of the games, in the books, the kid's perspective isn't reliable if you want to know the actual objective truth. Both Nicky and Aaron are misled throughout the story and followed the wrong clues. Carly ends up correcting these misinformations in the end of both trilogies. There are multiple retcons happening, books and games-wise. One of them is the fact that Nicky in the books figures out the truth at age 13 and not as an adult. I left this detail in the interview reaction video, knowing it would come up in this current video. Nikita specifically confirmed that in the games, Nicky figures out what happened to Theodore and his family when he is a grown adult. With this and other unmatching details, it is currently impossible to tie the books and the games together and pretend that they are the exact same thing, because it is the details that Carly ends up in which cause the difference. If you want to have fun, then I recommend treating each Hello Neighbor media like games, books, games, and cartoon and whatever as a different take on the same story. Theodore and Nicky are labeled to be very similar when it comes to behavior. At some point, I kind of expected the plot twist which just never happened, like Nicky is in fact Theodore's long-lost son. This obviously wasn't the case. There were no big twists in either of the trilogies. However, there are clear hints to Theodore being a step ahead of Nicky, even in such a mental state in which he is in. Theodore knows what Nicky would do, and and knows where he would go, because he probably reminds him to his child self or something like that. And also he is the exact copy of his own son. Nikki and Aaron are each other's copies, behavior and thought-wise. There are little differences, but mostly they are the same. The way the trilogies play out are also quite similar writing-wise. I'm saying this as somebody who's been writing for over 20 years and has over 1,000 written pages just for the Hello Neighbor franchise in the form of alternative universes. There is a base setup where the main character is introduced to some kind of information that is very much lacking, and the main character wants to find out the ultimate truth about this information because he feels to be involved personally in some way. Main character is eventually led by wrong clues. He's on the wrong track, but he is weirdly addicted to an adult who in fact has a main role in the plot. Like in Nikki's case, he is kind of addicted to Theodore, and in Aaron's case, he will be addicted to Ike Gershowitz and his disappearance. And by the end of the trilogy, he realizes that he was on the wrong track, and they find out the objective truth, whether it's the writer, like Carly herself, telling the truth, or Theodore objectively tells them hey kids, so you are wrong and this is what actually happened. Carly also labels Theodore and Nikki similar characters. Theodore is, as I said, he's a crazy person in the books. Despite everything, he is described to be a very complex character, which he is. With the sanity included, he is still told to be a very caring and lovely man who would do anything to protect his family and loved ones. He ends up collapsing under the weight of traumas that have been happening to him ever since his childhood, as it later described in books 4 to 6. And getting no mental help, he completely crashes down by the end of book 3. He has no bad intentions. He doesn't harm the people, only the cultists, but they absolutely deserve it because they want to attack the kids, and he ends up saving the kids. And I'm certain that he has no hatred against Nikki. Nikki, who just judges him by look and is led by misunderstanding, giving Theodore no chance to explain himself or just consider the thought that Theodore may not be a villain, but somebody who is suffering or is a victim. That's pretty much it. Now comes the Aaron trilogy, which you can watch by clicking this video which appears on the screen here. It should appear, so click it. Don't wait, the video will end now, so click it.